Well, hello everyone and welcome to the Marketing Matters podcast. My name is Michael Christmas.
And I'm Catherine Taylor, and we're here to talk all things marketing with industry experts that have some great marketing insights to offer all of you budding marketers out there.
That's right. This podcast is made with our network, for our network, and we're very proud to be connected with so many talented professionals that we wanted to have this podcast as a platform to discuss your journeys and provide some inspiration and conversation topics so we can all keep engaging with each other.
Today, we are lucky enough to be having a chat with the lovely Vera Skocic. Welcome to the Marketing Matters podcast, Vera. How are you today?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Feeling good. Happy to share information.
Very, very happy to have you on, Vera. You have a very impressive diversified profile, which is going to be very interesting to go through. But firstly, do you want to kick things off by telling us a bit about how you got started in marketing?
Yeah. So I originally, when I finished high school, I wanted to be a lawyer. I had no idea what that actually meant, but missed out by one point. So ended up in a marketing degree, and I had also started working as well. So by the time I was in my second year of uni, I was in a full-time job. So did the mature age route. And then my first job was actually managing mystery shopping programs for a loyalty marketing company, which was really interesting, and then moved my way through different consumer marketing roles. Spent a couple of years with the amazing team at Wizard Home Loans, so building what was a challenger brand in the financial services market as part of a small management team that built the brand not only nationally but along the eastern seaboard. And then I found my way at The Good Guys, which was obviously even now a household name in retail electrical, and originally came in there on a local area marketing appointment. And within about 9 months, they changed their CEO and their CMO, and they approached me to set up the consumer insights and brand function. And some of the outputs of that was a segmentation model that is still in place even today. And also then that helped generate essentially a roadmap for the rest of the organisation around not only who we're targeting, but how do we get more of those customers. So the roadmap essentially impacted merchandise, how we train our staff in store, how we greet our customers in store. So it was an amazing experience. And then the GFC hit.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously when we've spoken previously about, during the GFC you did face some challenging times, but then how, obviously it did turn out to be real positive, and how it went on to shape the rest of your career. Especially now there's, a lot of people out there who are facing adversity. So it'd be very, good just to hear how you did deal with that.
Yeah, so I mean the GFC, and there's some great lessons in hindsight that you learn from what a lot of people are experiencing today. So with the GFC, I did take a bit of a career break and looked after my partner, who's now my husband, post back surgery. But one of the roles that I had at The Good Guys was, as part of the segmentation model, was speaking with not only new staff that were onboarding into the organisation, but also our suppliers and agencies around who our key customers were, where they were on the ground, how we needed to reach them. And so during the GFC, one of those suppliers approached me and said, Vera, we really need to enable and realise our solutions sales strategy. And a big part of that is understanding our key buyer. So we really need someone that can come in, someone at your level that has been fundamental to purchasing decisions of our product, and teach us how to speak to that audience. And so that's then how my transition into B2B started. So from there, then I had spent a couple of years working with that executive team and the sales team, and basically building out a group brand proposition. I also managed bids and tenders so we could stay really close to the sales process and the manufacturing teams. And then we also embedded an insights portal as well, so our teams could start to apply a lot of these learnings when they were speaking to customers as well. So we were really paying it forward in that sense. And then Australia Post had heard about some of the work that I was doing with this organisation who was in an adjacent category. And they said, well, we have a similar issue. We obviously have our core product being mail, which is facing a decline. And we need someone to come in and not only revitalise our brand in that category and reposition male and its value in the marketing mix, but equally we want to start moving into emerging categories like digital identity, financial services and others. So from PMP, my second major role in B2B marketing was with Australia Post. So really working in industries as, I guess, either the disruptor or those that are being disrupted. So often they're organisations that are undergoing transformation and growth. And a really key part, I guess, of my success is working not only within the marketing silo, but cross-functionally to understand what's happening in the market, and then how do we engage key customers across the life cycle, and then feed that back into the organisation. So you essentially create almost a continuous loop of learning.
Absolutely. So before we do move on, maybe just share with us a little bit about the lessons that, you sort of did learn during that time, and how, you use that time to, really help move yourself forward. Yeah,
great. So, and I imagine a lot of people are feeling this right now. So firstly, you're not alone. There are a lot of us that have experienced or are experiencing that currently. The main thing for mine, I think I had to really decide at that point what sort of marketer did I want to be. So a lot of people might stay in consumer for a long time or within a particular industry. For me, the thing that stood out, having had this amazing experience at The Good Guys, was the parts that I really enjoyed about that role. So things that I took away from that were that I enjoyed having a cross-functional approach, so working with different parts of the organisation. And also that I liked the sense of having a data-driven conversation. And I think for mine then, when I started to move, no matter where I went, because I had a cross-functional mindset and then also understood the commercial reality of where marketing's investment was to the organisation, once you start to add those to a third dimension, which is that of a customer mindset, it really makes it quite easy for you to talk to those strengths. And so I found that I really had to sort of stop and take stock of what my strong suit was, and also the things that I didn't want to be doing. So, marketing operations has never been something that's interested me, but talking about the customer and really sitting in their shoes and hearing from other parts of the business and getting everyone really aligned around, okay, well, now we all understand what our shared purpose is, which is getting more of the same customers. That was something that I really had to learn. And with that also comes the knowledge that you have to give yourself the time to find the right roles. So not all of the roles that, were advertised or came across my path were going to fit that criteria. So you have to make some hard decisions around, well, is this role really going to be the one that I want to be working in for the next 3 to 5 years? And equally, where will it take me after that? So for those that might be contemplating something that really, all things going well, you would never even have looked at, I would encourage you to just, stay firm on where you are and what works for you, and not look at something that is perhaps the poor cousin to what your ideal role looks like.
Vera, I think that's a really good point. I mean, not everyone has the time or in a situation to be able to wait around for that perfect role. We've all got bills to pay, obviously, but ideally, yes, you want to stay true and strict to what you really want as your next role and what's going to be best for your career. There's actually a book that I often suggest to people, which is called What Color is Your Parachute? I think the author is Richard Bowles. What color is your parachute? And it delves into what are your natural personality and what traits and what are your skills that you've learned so far in your career, and really helps you guide through the best way to sort of think about what might be the next step in your career. So I encourage everyone to go and look for that. And they do a tweaked version every year that gets released. So maybe look for What Color is Your Parachute 2020 and see if that might help you if you're looking for tips and tricks on the next transition of your next role. Obviously, it's also easier to work with a recruiter who can help you sort of map out the market and see what might be good for you. Going back to your diversity Vera, on your profile. You've worked in permanent positions with enterprise organizations, in startups, and also a very decent amount of freelance work. Many of our connections may have focused their careers to only working in enterprise organizations or large or predominantly startups, and or have never done contract work before, which we help people walk people through. What were the biggest challenges that you found transitioning between the different environments?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, Michael, to the point earlier, the key is really to understand, where you can really thrive. And in that sense, then, if you have a passion for the customer and connecting data and all parts of the organization, as I do, to create customer engagement, well, then really with that sort of value prop and mindset, you can move across industries, as I have done. So, I mean, retail and franchising are totally different to corporate. Retail is a fast pace. My team were releasing campaigns every fortnight across print, broadcast, and digital media for a store network that I think was around 100 stores by the time I left in Australia and New Zealand. And so we were working with the merchandise team to identify trends and the uplift we needed to see based on stock volume and margin. We were engaging the store proprietors to build their trust. Franchising presents a unique challenge in that you're essentially selling yourself as an asset to their business. So at The Good Guys and Wizard, they were both the same in that regard. You had to set some guardrails on how the brand would operate in a local area, which is difficult when it's their hard-earned money that you're spending. But you couldn't do it in a way that restricted their entrepreneurial spirit, because after all, they were the face of our brand, the local heroes, if you like. So that taught me a couple of things. One, that you need to lead with data in a conversation. And so being business owners, big box retailers, mortgage brokers, they were well versed in financials. So, a lot of the questions that we would have before the work could even start was, how much do I need to invest? What will I get for it? When will I see a return? How much is everyone else paying was always a big question. What other options were being considered? And these are all fair questions. So I learned really quickly when dealing with stakeholders to lead with data and anticipate questions. So that was a really great, exercise or a baptism of fire on stakeholder management when it came to retail and franchising. And that's where the segmentation model that I established was so important, because it enabled a data-driven conversation around the likely return of targeting key customers, but also where we could potentially overinvest in the wrong areas if we weren't careful. So with The Good Guys, for example, the segmentation model determined quite clearly that price wasn't a driver for every segment. Some customers were converting through a broader product range in store. So a discounting strategy would only appeal to some people, whereas other customers needed more confidence in the salesperson and the after sales support we were offering. So my challenge was to achieve gains across each segment. I needed a tiered strategy. And so I learnt another important lesson, which was to think cross-functionally. So across the organisation, to engage the customer, I had to be working with all parts of the business. So that was another really important point that I learnt. And that then helped me segue, I think, into B2B, because with B2B, the salespeople really held so much knowledge around the customer, particularly when you're talking at an enterprise sales level. I had to really, expect a steep learning curve and also thrive in that kind of environment. And I did love it. Every marketer has had a supplier who has presented to them with absolutely no idea of the challenges that marketers face. And so I didn't want my sales teams, our sales teams, going into that same situation. P&P had 7 different arms of the business that they were trying to cross-sell, and each of those were quite technical. So navigating a customer conversation from catalogue printing to marketing automation platforms, then to psychographic data, you're not controlling the message in market in a B2B scenario. You're almost totally dependent on the aptitude of the salesperson to tell the story. So my focus there, and also at Australia Post, was really to build capability. So not only develop a group value proposition and launch the brand in market or reposition, but also then build platforms where our salespeople and our product people could learn and share information, but equally then help them shape the narrative by our bids and tenders, our sales enablement tools, using those as conversation starters, but also as leave behinds. So the B2B component really taught me a lot about the sales process, and it's not too dissimilar to how consumers buy, but it helps you flip your thinking and add this other lens. And the way that I was able to do that was, again, to put myself in the shoes of a customer, which in this case was myself and my marketing peers. So that was probably the third lesson that I learnt. That environment also taught me how to lead during times of change. And a big part of that was to be agile, not only in what was happening in the market, but across the organisation. Heading up a digital startup was altogether different again. So, and I took on that challenge because I'd gotten to a point in my career, almost 20 years in consumer and B2B across multiple sectors, and was given the opportunity to head up a digital startup in a wellness space that was important to me. So when we were talking about sugar, we were talking about parents, parental guilt about what they feed their children. We were talking about educating our younger generations into healthy eating, so paying it forward and creating social value. So a lot of those things appealed to me about heading up that sugar movement. But it was also a great way to test the knowledge that I had acquired over the course of my career. And some days were a real thrill, particularly when you're growth hacking, experimenting. Every day is different. Some days were also really lonely because you really are, it's just you're really leaning on your own knowledge, and you're building a network of often a bespoke, agency model. So you outsource a bit. And so managing costs, you have a fixed and variable component of, depending on whatever capability you're working at the time. It's a much more fluid, agile process. And so in that sense, that was an amazing opportunity. And then now when I look at freelancing, I can see how all of the sectors I've worked in across, traditional broadcast, print, digital media, different buyers, different stakeholders, I can now see as a freelancer how all of that has helped me do freelancing for the last 4 years, because I've really cut across most of the challenges that any organisation that engages me has experienced and lived through them as well. So consistently, they've been roles that provide a blank canvas that define the market and the target customer, but then also design and develop a roadmap and a way forward. So in hindsight, I can see how each of those led me here. But at the time, it was really a case of just talking to those three things that I mentioned earlier, which was being commercial, being cross-functional, and being customer focused. So it's probably a long answer to your question, but I hope that it gives the detail that your listeners are after.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome. It's given obviously a lot of insight, and I think there'll definitely be a lot of takeaways, for people just even in listening to, your experience. I suppose just to follow on from that, what was sort of probably the most useful advice that you received during that, during these, times, and what advice would you give to people who, might want to make a transition between, completely different environments? So say someone who wants to potentially go from enterprise to startup or vice versa.
If you're going to move from different industries, you're on a learning curve. You don't have all the answers. So the people that you surround yourself with becomes really important. So my advice to those looking to transition would be, firstly, to understand that those around you are going to want you to succeed as well. They will be more than happy to give you advice and share their knowledge with you. And if you ask them questions that can open up a conversation rather than, I think, jumping to a solution, that just opens up a wealth of information and opportunity for not only you, but also the organisation. So that would probably be the advice I would give to others looking to transition, is to accept that you're on that journey because you've chosen to learn. For me, that is something that I tend to believe in, that, you know, marketers need to be lifelong learners. So I heard an analogy once where someone had said, to stay fit, I don't go to the gym once and then I'm done for the next 10 to 20 years. I go regularly so that I can continue learning. And I think that that's the same for marketers. Our space changes so quickly that we really need to make sure that we're on the front foot and picking up information that is around us. So whether that's new technologies or how things knit together or what customers are doing, you know, continuing to be engaged in what's happening with the customer, our audience, and the world around us, I think, is the most important thing.
You're touching on some really interesting points, and I think that people will be getting a lot of value from this. You are very senior in the market now. In your last 3 positions, Vera, you've been head of marketing, GM, program director. Just an interesting question that crossed my mind. Do you think that profile diversity and transitioning between different environments like you have, do you think that is key to your success or to your progression that you've had?
For me personally, yes. I think that, you know, what we've seen with the advent of technology is that functions like marketing, we're seeing that with IT now, they're coming out from the back office and really spearheading a lot of change and transformation. And I think to do that, you need to be open to working cross-functionally. So, you know, there's a lot of talk about removing silos, but I think marketers really need to be at the forefront of that, particularly if you're going to work across the whole life cycle. If you're, you know, in the attract stage of the funnel and that's all that you do, well then, you know, taking on a more branding and positioning focus in your career is fine. But if you want to be moving up in an organization, you really need to be thinking across that whole life cycle. And that in and of itself means that you need to step out and engage with other parts of the business, listen to your customers, and in doing so, you can't help but get diverse in your opinions and knowledge. So I think it's a necessity, but it's also an outcome of having done a good job.
I mean, obviously, sort of you touched on there, you know, there's been sort of a lot of change in the marketing world, and you have to, you know, be able to obviously adapt to that and have an interest in that and want to learn. Where do you see the future of marketing?
Oh, I mean, look, if we knew that, Catherine, how lucky would we be, hey? Look, there's always going to be a conversation or an argument, depending on where you sit, around who owns the customer and also who owns the data. So, I mean, in years gone by, sales and marketing, or channel and marketing, had owned the customer, metaphorically speaking. That less and less is happening, less and less so now. I mean, again, I touched on IT. They're becoming product owners in an organisation. So that's been a big shift. And they're often driving things like design thinking, HCD, the user experience. So I think for the future of marketing, they really need to be, and Catherine, you would see this in your MarTech recruitment, they really need to be engaging in conversations with the enablers of the business, talking well beyond brand and positioning, and really getting people to understand around who is the customer, what do we need to do. So make the customer part of, you know, every touch point in your life cycle. And I think also then this notion of achieving baseline growth across the whole life cycle is just too hard. In the days of where we are now, which is really growth and experimentation, we need to understand, or marketers need to understand, what are the points across the life cycle that they're going to focus on today, incrementally build some baseline growth, and then move their attention to other parts of the life cycle or the customer journey. So this whole blanket approach, I think, will start to erode, and you will see that more with personalization, with digital tech taking a lead in how we engage with customers as well. So they're sort of the things that I think will be happening more and more in the future.
Good insights, Vera, and I think time sensitively we'll need to wrap up in a second, but I did want to sort of highlight one of your points that I thought was really good, how you started touching on the continued growth mindset that you have, and I think that we should all really have, and I like how you mentioned sort of continuing to be engaged with your audience and the world around us. I'd really like to finish on that point. I thought that was very relevant. But Vera, thank you so much for coming on board. You've got an amazing profile, some really good experiences, and hindsight's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Sort of to look back and see how you progressed through your career so far.
Hopefully we will be here 6 months from now and see some new trends that are starting and new growth opportunities. So thank you for the opportunity to chat with you today.
No worries,
we've really
both enjoyed listening to you, and I think all of our listeners will really enjoy it as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vera, for coming on. And as always, everybody, thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay positive, and we'll see you on the next Marketing Matters episode.